Alright, hey, what's going on, guys? This is Mast, and today we're going to be doing a Deadlock tier list, which I am not planning on doing many of in the future. I don't remember if I ever actually did one of these for Smite. If so, it's maybe seeming a little wrong that I'm doing this for Deadlock, but there's way fewer heroes in Deadlock, and I feel like since it's a new game, it feels a little more relevant rather than a game that's been out for so long and has so many more heroes you're kind of taking into consideration. I did rank up to Ascension 5 when rank came out, so I feel like I have a decent idea of what I'm talking about. I haven't bothered playing ranked since. I'm definitely not a pro player, competitive player, anything. So for the rankings here, we're just going to base it on how strong I think the hero feels in my hands, and then also how strong the hero feels in enemy hands, or ally hands, I guess, when I'm playing like with them on my team or with them on the enemy team. And we'll go mostly A to Z. This is not a list I made myself. I checked and made sure that every single hero is in it, but it's a little bit out of order back here. I don't know what happened. Maybe they don't know the alphabet so well. That's okay. But yeah, I figured we'd go ahead and throw together a little tier list and talk about the actual strengths, weaknesses of character, where I think they stand and why, especially because at this point, I think we've played every hero on the channel at least 2 times, except for maybe Bebop. And once we get to Bebop momentarily, you will see why we have not done that with Bebop. And there's average. You guys have average Jonas. If you want your Bebop, it's like his main character by far. Yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So Abrams I thought was crazy strong when I first started playing Deadlock. I think in noob levels, I'm assuming that's still true, and he's all the way up in S. I'm just going to give him a B. I think Abrams is capable of doing quite a bit, but it's difficult to get those dashes connected in impactful ways in the late game, and I think the ultimate is too unreliable of an ability, so he ends up feeling kind of clunky. He's very strong in the early to mid game. He's dominant in most lanes. There are some ranged solo lanes that he's atrocious in, where it's like, okay, I'm Abrams, I have good like soul secure, I have good pressure, but if you're great Talon, you can sit back tower, snipe me, and I literally can't play the game. Like, what? I straight up have to dive your tower off cooldown and just eat a ton of damage, which especially since tower buffs is actually problematic. So he mostly feels really dominant in the early to mid game. The issues that I end up having with him is if you're not getting big dashes in the late game, just dashing a person a lot of the time is not enough. If you're picking them, it's enough. If they're out of position, you catch them with a stun, you either kill them on your own or your teammate follows up, then that's obviously really good. You're now in a 6v5. But if you're dashing in the team fight and you catch one person, then you're temporarily taking them out of the fight. You're normally not going to be one-shotting them, maybe overtime kill them, but you're not going to tend to be one-shotting them. And then you're not overall impacting the rest of the fight. What you want to be is that frontline dive character. So you need those big 2 to 3 person dashes, which are inconsistent to get. They're not very easy to get. So it makes him feel like sometimes you can have a crazy game and sometimes you can be kind of low impact in the late game. The biggest thing that stands out to me is his ultimate. The more that I play the game, the more I find Abrams' ult is shockingly underwhelming in scenarios that are not a mid fight, because the ultimate takes so long to go off. If you're trying to get out of a fight and you're ulting as you're getting engaged on, a lot of the time you're going to get punished unless the ultimate's already at max rank and you're getting that unstoppable. And if you're ulting into a fight, people have so much time to react that even though you should still be able to catch one person, a lot of the time you're only going to be catching 1 to 2 people with ult and not like a giant 3 to 4 man ult. And then even when you're catching those people, to me it feels like Abrams' stun kind of underwhelming on the ultimate. Like, it doesn't last that long. So it mostly stands out to me for its ability to secure the mid buff, the rejuve, which is really, really strong, but is also fairly situational. And of course, Abrams' ult's still good in team fights, but it's such a long cooldown. A lot of time it doesn't do anywhere near something like a Dynamo ult. So it just feels okay. It feels decent. So I think that mostly does it for him as a character. Is like, he's a solid frontliner, but it feels like it's inconsistent to make the big plays you want to make on him. Bebop. I hate him. I think Bebop sucks so much right now. This is a complete swap. When I started playing, Bebop probably was here. I wasn't at a high level yet, so maybe at high levels he was like here. And then Bebop has been more changed than any hero. Even I think after the recent Yamato ult changes, I would say Bebop's like state in the game feels more changed than any other hero, which makes sense because he's a hero that does a lot of different crazy things. Yeah, Bebop down here right now. I think he is absolutely atrocious at the moment. And the reason he's atrocious at the moment is gun build Bebop does not feel like it does something that another character doesn't do overall. Like, yes, you can pull people, but your damage is not going to outshine other characters. Bomb build Bebop doesn't feel like it does enough damage unless you just have an absolutely absurd hyper carry build of a game. where like you're 20-2 and you just have an insane amount of bomb stacks. And even then there's a lot of counterplay to it because you can get ethereal shift, you can get debuff remover. Of course, you can just get improved spirit armor and at least nerf it. So it's really hard to make bomb Bebop as like a focus build do a lot. I think where he shines the most right now is kind of a hybrid, just general utility build where he's got like knockdown, he pulls somebody out of position, he's got improved burst on the bomb, so the bomb inherently does like a quarter of their health at least. Some gun damage so that he can follow up the bomb a little bit, maybe a rescue beam to help out teammates. I think is like the best spot for Bebop. The big thing that bugs me at the moment is Bebop ult feels so bad to use in most circumstances. And the build that I love the most on Bebop was what I call the orbital laser, where you like majestic leap or zip line or do something to get a bunch of verticality and just beam down on a lane, a team fight, whatever it may be, where you're kind of out of range of the rest of the fight and you're getting full DPS from a range that you normally could not be getting full DPS because, you know, so few characters like Grey Talon snipes, Bebop ult. Some of the only abilities, Yamato snipe, or not Yamato, Vindicta snipe, some of the only abilities where you can just launch them from range and just do full damage. So that was really strong. It got absolutely hard nerfed because both Majestic Leap and Bebop ult got hard nerfed. So I think he feels really, really bad right now. Dynamo. Even in, I'm thinking of like casuals and what would be ranked. Even in these, Dynamo is S tier. Dynamo is an absolutely crazy character. Dynamo is so, so strong. And it's just because he has every ability he has is good and capable of doing an absurd amount in a variety of situations. Dynamo 1 we saw with what I called the Impregnator build. Yes, we really named it something that wild. When you're focusing on the one heavily with like improved reach, spirit scaling to get the reach even longer, rapid recharge, cooldown, whatever, you can get so many of those up, do a ton of damage, reach a massive distance, constantly CC people. Insane ability. So, so strong. Normally, if you're seeing like more competitive level play, you're not going to see an ability that focused on Spirit Dynamo or a build that focused on Spirit Dynamo. But that ability on its own is very, very good. Scales very, very well. The 2 is maybe the best support ability in the game. Now, Viscous Cube is better and more reliable, but it is like approaching Viscous Cube level ability on a way lower cooldown and is situationally better than Viscous Cube. Because on its own, when you're just self-casting it, it's nothing special. You're maybe getting through some cool stuff. Maybe you're immuning a Bebop bomb. Maybe you're just straight up like teleporting through an ability, reloading, getting fire rate, whatever. But when you're using the self-cast version that pulls your teammates with you, you can just, we've seen it in videos before, like we can just get out of Lash ult. You can do so many things like that. Maybe Wraith got a big ult. You can pull at least a few people out, potentially everybody out, depending on the timing of it. There's so many things like that where it's like, okay, big thing is incoming, and you just nope them out. And it can be one person, it can be 3 people. The Dynamo 2 is capable of being so, so strong. And even in smaller scenarios, even if it's like Geist bomb is incoming, all right, you just saved you and your teammate like a third of their health bar. That's really big. Dynamo 3, once it's max, is insanely strong as a heal ability. Because you are speedy, you are healing a ton, you are healing your teammates a ton, so you are both moving around very, very quickly, and then also providing a lot of general AoE sustain, which there is not a lot to come by. Normally that's going to be, Ivy is capable of providing that, but that's situational because that's like bullet lifesteal. And then other than that, you're getting like Viscous Cube, McGinnis turret, or not McGinnis turret, McGinnis 2, but you have to stay in it. Is there anybody else? Am I forgetting something big? No, Kelvin 1. Kelvin 1's actually similar. Kelvin 1 provides a lot of healing. Not too many heals like that in the game in terms of abilities, so capable of providing quite a bit. You do need to max it for it to feel anywhere near as good because you're so slow until you max it, and the healing goes up significantly. And then Dynamo Ultimate, probably the best ultimate in the game. I don't know who you could possibly say has a better ultimate. It's an insanely long cooldown for a reason. Refresher is like considered kind of the Dynamo item more than anybody else's item for a reason. Just Black Hole is capable of doing some absurd things. And if you do watch any competitive, especially if you watch the recent tournament this weekend on Saturday, which is why we didn't have a video Saturday, as I spent way too long watching it and installing Lore Rim and installing Skyrim because I have problems. Yeah, it's actually insane how strong that ability is. And even in casuals and ranked, that's true too. So Grey Talon. This is a weird one. Grey Talon's been going through a lot of changes recently where like, I think the community's thoughts on him were here recently. I thought he was here. And then he got buffed a ton and got up into like this territory, and then he got nerfed back down a bit. I think probably here. I think probably just a B for Grey Talon. He's capable of doing a lot, but I think normally the way that he's capable of doing a lot is a very focused spirit build And the issue with very focused spirit builds like that, when you're not building utility spirit items, but you're building actual damage spirit items, improved spirit armor is so strong. It shuts builds down so hard. And it's not that he's going to stop doing damage, it's that he's not going to be able to one-shot you. That's something that we'll see soon with Lash, is the Lash slam build is so fun, but he doesn't scale hard enough, and spirit armor is so strong that if you full commit to a Lash slam build and like every person on their team built improved spirit armor, it's not going to feel like a remotely good build. It's actually just impossible for it to. So Great Talon goes through that a little bit, where Great Talon DPS is higher and does have bullet damage to go with it, but specifically that got nerfed recently. But the one, as good as it is at range, as many of these you can spam out once you get rapid recharge, as crazy as the spirit scaling is, just simply building improved spirit armor can shut it down so hard. And I feel like the community overall is more and more gravitating towards, oh, if there is any relevance in the enemy team's comp, it is crazy how strong spirit armor is. So many builds are starting to realize that spirit armor into improved spirit armor is so core in so many situations, even if you're like Haze, even if you're just what would normally be a squishy character. So other than that, in terms of his kit, Great Talon provides a ton of damage from range with the 1, which is really strong, pretty reliable ability because it goes off pretty fast. The 2 can get shut down fairly hard if you're getting knockdowns, if there are CCs that can reach it, because it's not going to be super high in the air like Vindicta, so it's easier to deal with. But he does have the air dashes that gives him more mobility than Vindicta gets in her 2. The trap tends to feel underwhelming. The ultimate a lot of the time feels underwhelming, because if you're not getting either just lucky situations where you're finishing people off, setting up picks, whatever it may be, a lot of the time it's just kind of a limited impact, at least to start, long cooldown. You don't really want to put points into it because it's really important to get the 2 and the 1 max as quick as possible. So if you are putting points into it, then your actual 1v1s are a lot worse. Just kind of feels like plays so heavily around the 2 and the 1 that the 3 and the 4 kind of just are barely there as abilities compared to most other characters is the main downside. And if those were stronger, then Great Talon probably somewhere higher up. Haze. Somewhere in here, I think Bebop is atrocious at the moment. I think Haze may be just as atrocious. I think I'll just put her in C. If I'm definitely thinking of how, like, if I'm running into a Bebop, if I'm playing with a Bebop, or I'm playing with a Haze running into a Haze, she normally overall feels stronger. If I'm playing Haze, she normally overall feels stronger. But I think a lot of that comes down to people not counter building enough. And if you do just counter build enough, I think she's probably down here. So I think on average she feels up here, but she probably should be down here with Bebop. The reason Haze feels so bad is she is so bullet damage dependent, and metal skin exists. You can build metal skin for 3k and for 3.5 seconds base, and then if you have duration that scales, you can just immune bullet damage. And so at that point, you're getting Haze slept, you're getting the little bit of spirit damage on Haze 3, and then if she has like Tesla bullets or something like that, you can eat that spirit damage. That is literally it. Every other piece of damage she does, which is going to be like 90% of it on a normal build, is just simply not going through, and you're immuning her and you can just kill her. So she is in a very awkward spot because of that alone. Of course, you can build bullet armor. You can build Withering Whip is really strong right now. Very hard counter to Haze and just a good item in general. So there are plenty of other counters to deal with her, like before that. Return Fire, incredibly strong at the moment. Like if you're looking for tier 2 type items to deal with her, you've definitely got options. But the simple thing is just metal skin on its own. Once you get that done, Haze doesn't get to play the game with any build. With any single build, it's basically not happening. So she feels really awkward because of that. I definitely think people have come around to figuring out how to deal with and shut down the like crazy late game scaling Ricochet Hazes and stuff like that. So it feels like right now the current probably best build for her is building into the early and the mid game and going Burst Fire, going like Kinetic Dash, Active Reload, Swift Striker, stuff like that. Just an insane amount of fire rate, maybe a slowing Hex, and just trying to like beam somebody and then dagger them so that they're stuck, and then beaming them again and then just trying to delete them as fast as possible before they get metal skin, or assuming they never build metal skin. But then the moment they get that done, you don't get to do it, and then, and then she falls off insanely hard. And then if you go for the Ricochet build late game, everybody can have metal skin, and you're playing so much more around those team fights, or they're just shutting you down, noping you out, and killing you in the process. So very much depends on how people are building, but if they build that one simple item, if they teach you this one simple trick, then that's kind of all it takes. As far as her kit's concerned, the reason that's really awkward for her is, like we've done, I literally, like before anybody was doing it, I was doing the double dagger build for Haze, and I think that's funny as hell. But in terms of like any meta relevance, to scale into that, you need a ton of scaling. You need them to not be building spirit armor, and you need to land 2 daggers to be like one-shotting somebody. So it's not very relevant in terms of countering metal skin, where it's like, yes, you can kill a person, but in team fights, you're still not going to be particularly relevant. So it's not actually a meta build, it's just a funny build. And then That makes Dagger, if you're not building into it, pretty weak in terms of damage. Her 2 does not provide her damage. Her 3 is just scaling her weapon damage. Her ult is providing weapon damage in an AoE format. Basically, just the simple reason Haze is not strong is just because she is too one-dimensional as a character, and so it's too easy to just deal with her and shut her down. Even though I like her, even though she's fun, Infernus, I think realistically, if he is played very well, Infernus should probably be an S. But I think we're just going to keep him in A because I don't think he's typically played really, really well. And I think this S even depends on like team synergy around him as well. So Infernus is basically just better Haze in a lot of different situations. Infernus does so much of what Haze does, but the reason Infernus is better is he provides more general utility through his kit, and he deals both types of damage. He can deal gun damage, and he can deal spirit damage, and he can deal a stupid amount of both. Inherently, his gun damage is actually not that crazy, but he is literally just inherently going to be left-clicking quite a bit, so that gun damage is going to end up dealing a decent amount, and then plays heavily around his burn, his 2, his ult, and then a lot of the time toxic bullets as well for a stupid amount of spirit damage. And because he can go Mystic Vuln and then eventually escalating exposure, when you're deep in the game, whether you have spirit armor or not, which is not as strong as metal skin as a shutdown item, it's just armor, but whether you have spirit armor or not, he can burn through a ton of that spirit armor and inherently just guarantee that he's going to be doing a lot of that damage. You can buy debuff remover, but he can just proc it again. Like, debuff remover is decent into him, but it's not just like, okay, you no longer exist as a character, you can just shoot another 10 bullets. So very, very strong character. The thing for Infernus that stands out a lot is he inherently does so much damage. As long as he gets that burn on you, it is going to do a big chunk. If he continues to shoot you, continues to proc it, it's going to do that much more. So that sets him up so that he can go into different flex items, where once he's kind of got the core build online of like Soul Shredder bullets, Toxic bullets, Duration Extender, Mystic Vulnerability, some Lifesteal, stuff like that, he can start going into Ricochet, into Inhibitor, maybe into Leech for a ton of sustain, into escalating exposure so that the dot does more. And like, you can go so many different routes with Infernus where you can get either very high lifesteal, very tanky, both, focus on the DPS more, and you can make him just fit a game a lot better so that he can be an absolute menace 1v1 in team fights, very tanky, hard to kill. Like, he can do so many different things, but just reliably impact fights in so many different circumstances. So this character is crazy. But if you're just running him into him in an average pub game, I don't think he's feeling up here. I think he just feels strong. It's pretty much what it comes down to. Ivy is a weird one. I think most people play Ivy really poorly. I think your average Ivy is somewhere in here. I think realistically Ivy's here. That might sound a little contradictory to this. I think it's exclusively, I just don't think there are that many Ivy players. I think the average, like maybe I'm out of touch. I think the average person I run into that's playing Ivy, I think they just barely play her and they just happen to be on Ivy. So this one I'm maybe going to show a little bias on. I think Ivy is actually pretty strong, and like in terms of competitive is probably up here, and in terms of pubs should be up here. And it's just, it seems like so few people actually play her like in pubs as like a main or anything compared to other characters. So for me, when I play Ivy, I feel like I can run a ton of different builds, and those builds can all be really strong, and the character is just inherently valuable. And the reason for that is Ivy 1 is just a good ability on its own. Doesn't stand out a lot to start the game, but once you get it maxed up, whether you're building into it or not, it's going to just have good general impact where the DPS inherently hits hard once it's maxed out. The area is pretty big. It's just a good ability. Ivy 2 is very inconsistent because of the scaling. If you're going into a spirit build and scaling it up, it's good, but it doesn't help you as much. It's more of a support ability. If you're going more of a gun build, then you're not scaling it up as much, so it's not as valuable of an ability, but it actually fits your own build better at the same time. So Ivy 2 mostly kind of sucks. Ivy 2 is a weird ability because of that. Ivy 3, very, very strong. It is not always easy to land, especially if you're not ulting, because if you're just simply 3ing point blank, same height as somebody, then a lot of the time they can just like dash out, they can just roll out of it. But it's a very strong ability because once it's maxed out, you're healing a 30% of your health bar, doing a decent amount of damage, and you're getting a big ass stun, and you're providing yourself with an invulnerability for stuff like 7 stun, Bebop bomb, stuff like that. Crazy ability, capable of doing a lot of things. Can be both aggressive, defensive, can do both at the same time. Really, really good. And then Ivy ult is something that I've come around to quite a bit, where Ivy ult is so much stronger than I gave it credit for when I first started playing her, because you just have so much control over the movement of it that you can use it in so many different ways. You can just straight up drop a bomb, dip, not go into the fight. You can just straight up face roll into them, just be like 2 feet above their head, drop it right on their head, 3 on them. So many different ways you can use it, and you can just stay in the air and just chuck vines, especially if you're going a spirit build. So it's an ability that has a lot of utility. And of course you can run Earn with it, which helps as well. So Ivy is just capable of doing so many things, and the gun does scale very hard if you do go a gun build. I still think the best way to play Ivy is Spirit build, similar to what we did for, I think, the first Ivy video on the channel, which is like rapid recharge, escalating exposure, improved reach. I don't remember if actual Spirit was in there. I don't remember if improved Spirit was. It's mostly just about getting the vines to cover a massive area and just chunk. And I think that's probably the best way to go. Maybe something that's more of a hybrid would be stronger. But the team fight potential inherently from just Ivy's kit is so strong that I think she is just inherently good. Kelvin. This one's tricky because I think Kelvin's really strong, but I think Dynamo's better Kelvin. So I think we have to put him in A. Maybe this would be a spot where A+ would be a worthy rank, but then also I feel like maybe Infernus would be A+. So I think we'll keep it simple, just put him in A. Dynamo to me feels like better Kelvin. I think Kelvin is easier to play than Dynamo by far, for sure. But if we're comparing the abilities side by side, Kelvin 1 kind of similar to Dynamo 3. I definitely think Kelvin 1 takes it because it's capable of doing damage and heals similar. So Kelvin 1 a better ability. In terms of the 2s, Kelvin 2 does not come close to Dynamo 2. They're fairly different, but they're both movement abilities. And Kelvin 2, it's like you can move yourself and potentially teammates around pretty quick. Dynamo 2, you can just like avoid entire ultimate. So like Dynamo 2 easily takes the cake. Kelvin 3 is pretty decent. In that case, we'd have to compare it to Dynamo 1. I think the slow and similar overall damage is not going to compete with the straight up knockups that you can scale a lot harder. So I think Dynamo 1 wins. And then in terms of ultimates, Dynamo ult is like the best ult in the game. So I think like it's a little bit weird to make that comparison, but they're both fairly support style characters. They both have healing. They both have big team fight ultimates. Dynamo just generally is going to tend to take the cake, but Kelvin is really good. Kelvin does have a valuable ultimate that can heal your team a lot, play well around objectives, freeze the rejuve, defend people off of base when they're sieging, I don't know where, it's mostly been bugged recently. It's not supposed to make it so you can keep hitting the enemy base while it's domed off. That's maybe still currently bugged where you can hit the enemy base while it's domed off. That's super OP. But maybe they fixed that bug temporarily again. At one point, they'd specifically made it so you couldn't do that anymore. And then there was some bug that made it so you could do it again. I don't even know what state it's in at the moment. So Kelvin is also really good for the flexibility of builds where it's like he's providing healing, he's providing slow, he's got movement, he's got that big team fight ult, but he can build gun, he can build support, he can build spirit to some degree. It's normally pretty troll to go like full spirit Kelvin. He just doesn't scale hard enough for it to tend to pay off. But he's got flexibility of build, which is good. And in general is probably like in terms of a true support pick where you are playing more of like a healing playstyle, pull people away playstyle. I think Rescue Beam Kelvin is probably the strongest support pick in the game because you can like it's a little bit weird to compare that to like Viscous, but Kelvin can provide so much height. It's really easy to get those angles to Rescue Beam with Kelvin when you've got Kelvin too. So if you're playing that playstyle, Kelvin is inherently really strong and you don't even really need to be doing that much damage. You can just kind of be providing healing, getting good team fight ult, stuff like that. Pretty reliable, consistent pick. So I think he's just inherently really good just because he provides quite a few different things that are all good, but they're not Dynamo levels of craziness. God, I'm now realizing there might not be very many people in S. This might be the Dynamo zone as I look through these picks. Geist is probably just a B. I think Geist is probably just a B. Geist is a bit of a tricky one. She is capable of, on average, like if you're playing into Geist or with Geist, like on average, she's going to be in any game that she's in the highest damage character. But that doesn't mean that much because that's just kind of what she does. And then she also self damages, so it's not inherently that good. The big thing for Geist is because she is such a damage character and she doesn't scale as hard as somebody like Infernus, a lot of the time she just feels decent. She feels solid. It's like, okay, in the early game, I'm going to be pretty good. I'm going to be able to throw bombs at them, get some decent damage built up. Occasionally, I'll be getting some nice swaps. In the mid game, we're doing pretty well. In the late game, we're providing a lot of team fight damage. She just doesn't scale super hard. She does have like a decent amount of area control, consistent damage. She's not tending to one-shot people, make big picks. She's just providing consistent, sustained DPS. And then as you're scaling into her build, you're getting that spirit armor up, that spirit lifesteal up, so that you're able to like survive your own self-damage just fine. And then also healing off of the damage you're inflicting, so you're able to kind of stay in the fight and keep pumping out that damage until you get full engaged on, and then you have no mobility and you're dead as hell, is how it tends to go. So, yeah, I don't know. I think she's just a solid B. I don't even think there's that much more to talk about. She's just kind of 1, 2, 3. They do damage. Once you get the build going, they heal her up. The 2 provides a silence, but it doesn't tend to matter that much. Swap loses a lot of its strength in the late game just because you're getting into team fights so much. So even if you're getting a good swap on somebody and maybe killing them, you're tending to die after that swap's down. So, yeah, I don't know. She's just kind of solid damage dealer. Solid AoE damage dealer. Lash, I think, has got to be an A. Lash does not tend to do crazy damage. Lash is, it seems weird for his playstyle as a character, because Lash is such a wacky pick where it's like, I might be climbing on a mid and slamming on your face at the 2-minute mark. I'm 2ing around the map and I've got superior stamina and maybe majestic leap, but I'm flying all over. And it's like you're getting these big slams, you're getting these big ultimates and stuff. But he's actually one of the most consistent heroes in the game. He is such a consistent pick. It is so rare that you should just be getting absolutely dumpstered, shut down, no damage impact Lash games, because his damage is just inherently good. Like the 3 just does decent base damage. The 1 just does decent base damage. Yes, he can get giant slams with the 1 and increase that damage by a ton, but even if you're not, it's still going to hit decently hard. The ultimate, it's pretty easy to be at least pulling one person with Lash ult. It is a long cooldown, but that person you're pulling is going to tend to be getting shut down unless it's just a 1v1 that you're ulting in. If you're ulting into a single other person, then they're going to tend to be dying, so it's a pretty reliable ult. The 2 is good for mobility. Superior stamina, which almost everybody should be building on Lash, is really good for mobility, so it's pretty easy to play safe with him and not just get constantly picked. So he's just very reliable as a character, and if you're going an actual meta build, you're going to be getting armors in there, you'll be getting some gun damage, some spirit damage, some different kind of utility items as well, like that superior stamina. He just does a lot of things decent, and so it's really hard to shut down any component of his build, and he just kind of gets to play the game the way he's going to play the game. So really, really solid. McGinnis, ugh. I think McGinnis feels so bad at the moment. I don't know what it is. I think McGinnis is probably a C right now. No, maybe a B. If we're talking competitive, McGinnis is in here. But if we're talking pubs, I think McGinnis is down here. Because the thing for McGinnis that's tricky at the moment is, this is a weird one. So McGinnis ult got pretty nerfed. McGinnis turrets sort of got nerfed. If you're not going turret build, they feel kind of more inherently reliable because they just start working faster. But then if you're going turret build, that doesn't function as well anymore because you just can't get as many potential turrets. So I think she's probably in a C for me, but then maybe could be up here. Yeah. This is probably also some recency bias because the McGinnises that I have played with / played against recently have had no particular standout impact for like the past 2 weeks. So there might be recency bias. Maybe it's just been coincidence in my games. The big thing is McGinnis ult really started taking over games, and then Valve was like, and they shut that down real quick, and now McGinnis ult build doesn't feel anywhere near as impactful. And then turret build, which kind of scales with the ult build, is not as impactful as you're getting the crazy turret scaling. And then I just think McGinnis gun build doesn't feel strong enough, so the thing that stands out is McGinnis support build, and normally that's not going to be something that feels particularly strong unless you're like a straight up top player in a comp game. So yeah, I think she just doesn't overall do enough consistently with her kit that stands out. Like Wall is a good ability. The 2 is a solid heal. Turrets will do things. The ult will do things. But she doesn't have any like crazy highlights at the moment that really makes her stand out to me. Mo and Krill. He's somewhere, probably just here. Probably just here. Mo's capable of Mo and Krill are capable of doing so much, but they're so single target where normally disarm is going to maybe hit 2 people, but tend to be hitting 1 to 2 people. The 1, unless just the team is absurdly stacked for some reason, is going to tend to clip 1 to 2 people. Same with Burrow. The ult can literally only hit 1 person. And so you're capable of picking single targets, but then the more coordinated the play, the harder it is to actually pick those single targets, because you can just simply CC off Mo and Krill. If you've got like a stun or something, you can CC the ultimate off. Burrow is good for getting out, but if you're caught enough out of position, it's not going to get you out. You just get so many resistances. And then the 1 and the 3 aren't inherently super powerful. Like the 3 is temporarily nice as a disarm, but if they're doing enough spirit damage, it basically doesn't matter. Maybe they can just kind of get through the disarm as well. The 1's very inconsistent. It's so much a kind of a greedy self-sustainability. So Mo is capable of doing a lot. I just think he's pretty easy to counter potentially as like this kind of 1v1 tanky pick character where like different than Abrams. Abrams has a lot more mobility, get out potential. Mo and Krill does not as much, but it's also inherently easier to just kind of, I have Mo ulted somebody, and then like that's going to be stronger than Abrams dash. But then also, of course, it's a longer cooldown than Abrams dash. So I think they're in a little bit of the same spot where it's like, how often are they providing enough impact? Mo and Krill's probably more consistently able to get big picks, but is way more likely to die getting those big picks than Abrams. And then does not have as strong of a get out of jail free card as Abrams ult tends to. Especially as you get late game, at least. So, yeah, I think that's probably where we're standing with it. Paradox got to be up here. I don't think Paradox gets to be an S. I I think Paradox just simply doesn't have enough of a team fight impact to be an S, but it's just so strong. Paradox 3 absolutely chunks. Paradox 1 is a decent ability. Paradox 2 is a decent ability, at least once it's maxed. Paradox ult is very strong. Very good pick character. Very fluid movement, able to get yourself, especially recently with the changes to Paradox ult, you're able to get out of your own ult so quickly. It feels like back when I started playing more so, at least once I started getting good after I'd started playing, Paradox ults got into a situation where it's like, okay, it's still scary, but if it's a big long-range Paradox ult swapping somebody into the enemy team, we are so often going to be able to at least beat up Paradox, if not just kill Paradox, while she goes for that big swap. And now the swap is so fast that you have that reaction time where Paradox knows what she's doing, your team doesn't know what she's doing as much, that swap happens so quick where she's out of position, you're like, oh, you have to react, and then Paradox is already getting out. It's so much harder to catch the Paradox, but the other person that she swapped with is still really out of position. So I think that's actually been overall a pretty solid buff for Paradox. It's kind of crazy how much that ult timing has made it safer to go for those really high impact swaps. And the rest of the character just does crazy single target damage, has a decent amount of survivability because of the 2, can fight inside the 1, which has a lot of ticking damage if you're keeping people inside of it. Just a really consistent, strong character. And one thing that's nice for Paradox is she feels so stable in terms of build because her scaling is so unique, where it's like she does a lot of spirit damage, she does a lot of weapon damage, but she doesn't really build spirit for spirit damage. So you can't just shut down Paradox with any sort of items. Bullet armor is not going to do anything crazy. Spirit armor is not going to do anything crazy. Ethereal shift is not going to be consistent or reliable. Like, it's hard to itemize against Paradox. She's just going to do her thing. But then Paradox doesn't have to worry about itemization because Paradox just kind of builds for the most part the same every game because you're mostly just building weapon damage and then like cooldown general effect type items. Mystic Vuln maybe, like just different items. You're not trying to get spirit scaling because the spirit scaling goes on so little of your actual damage. You just swap weapon damage into spirit damage. Pocket. Ooh. Pocket's gotta be an A. Pocket's damage is so disgusting. They're pretty consistent as a character. Huge team fight potential, good early game, good mid game, good late game, capable of getting out of situations literally nobody else can. Pocket is just like an absolute monster pick in so many scenarios, but does tend to lack just the absurd, we have won the game because I did a pocket thing. That doesn't tend to happen as much, at least not anymore, but is still really, really strong, really dominant, and just good in so many different scenarios where it's like if you're in a dual lane, if you're in a solo lane, you're going to be feeling pretty good in the early stages of those lanes. And then as you're starting to rotate, you can be getting big picks because Pocket has so much burst damage. If you're getting caught out, as long as your abilities are up, if your abilities are down, Pocket's terrible. But if your abilities are up, then it's like, oh no, I'm getting ganked. Throw Pocket 2 towards the tower, go into my 3, then teleport once the 2's reached a long distance. I am now back safe at my tower, and I can ult people in a team fight. And just Pocket has so many different things that are strong in a variety of situations and just ends up equaling huge mobility, tons of safety, massive damage, really hard to deal with, really, really powerful character. And so even though Pocket 1 got pretty hard nerfed like a few weeks ago, where Pocket 1 is no longer, you have to scale into it a lot more through leveling the ability, which is kind of problematic because you want to be putting 2 points into the 2 and the 3, and then at least 1 point in the ultimate as well. So it's hard to scale Pocket into their like ability scaling quite as fast. Still really strong character. Still 2, 3, barrage, if you're landing the barrage, the ultimate, they're just inherently such good abilities. And then it's fairly easy to like play the character. Once you get a feel for Pocket, it's pretty easy to play Pocket pretty solidly. 7. Probably just a B. 7 is capable of being up here along with like Infernus and stuff in terms of a damage dealer. Like right here, if we're looking at just the A tiers, Infernus is the only like comparable character to 7 in terms of DPS. But I think Infernus has so many other like itemizations that makes Infernus really strong. 7 is not as capable of doing Infernus damage and then having Infernus sustain / durability. So I think 7's just a B. And then one of the big things that I think people sleep on with 7 is if you can just shut down 7 1v1, if you can gank a 7, terrible character. 7 is so atrocious if you were just ganking in like a 1v2 or something. I think a lot of people end up thinking of 7 as like, oh, he has such reliable damage. You're just throwing balls. You're just zapping with your 3. The 2 will go off sometimes when you're throwing it. Like you'll occasionally get a stun people. Probably not going to tend to be, oh my God, I have 7 stuns, so they're dead. But it's like, it's a pretty solid ability. But then the issue is if you're catching 7 out of position, not in a team fight, not playing around teammates, then you are just going to be able to catch that 7 so off guard because 7's not going to be particularly fast. Like, you do have move speed scaling, but you're not going to tend to have it in those scenarios because that's going to tend to be early game. So 7 has ball. 7 has a stun that'll go off after almost 4 seconds, and then has some chain lightning to do some decent damage back, but cannot particularly run away, cannot particularly peel for himself, is not going to have some crazy turn potential type ability. So it's really easy to shut down 7 out of position. So you have to play so tucked into your team in such team fight circumstances a lot of the time. And I think that's the big flaw for the character. Whereas somebody like Infernus, I can just dash away. I can just use Infernus dash. If I need more than that, I can also throw an ult on myself. And that ult's going to just be a stronger 7 stun that goes off even faster. If I'm Haze even, because like I'm just trying to think of the big kind of relatively similar DPS characters, then Sleep Dagger is just kind of a quick version of 7 stun that can peel for me. It's not as AoE, but it'll go off quick, so that's a way to potentially get myself out of the gank. If I'm in a 2v1, I can make it a 1v1 and then dip. I think it's just like, potential to shut down 7 is there, but I don't see it happen that often, in all fairness. Other than that, 7 DPS does get very crazy. Once you get just remotely scaled on 7, the ball gets really big, does plenty of damage. The 2 does not hit super hard. Once you get at max, it definitely stuns for a long time. In general, just having a stun going off at some point is enough of like an annoyance, interference type ability that it's good. Chain Lightning, very strong ability. I don't think that's what it's actually called. I forget what it's called, but the 3, very strong ability, adds so much damage, really, really powerful, crazy in team fights when you're actually zapping between multiple enemy heroes. You can scale it very hard through spirit scaling as well. 7 ult mostly sucks once you get any good at the game. I don't remember if it actually got hard nerfed when I started playing. I think really it's just basically once you get familiar with the game, 7 ult falls off very, very hard. So it's not going to tend to be a very good ultimate. It's going to tend to be one of the weaker ults in the game. But just the simplicity of the 3-2-1 of 7's kit, once you're into the mid to the late game, is going to tend to be enough that 7's like just good, reliable damage in a variety of circumstances. It's just if you're caught out and you're punished on your own, it is so easy to do that to 7 compared to so many other characters in the game. Very few people get as punished as 7 does when you're caught out. Vindicta. Probably... No, Vindicta just got nerfed, so I don't know where she stands at the moment. Maybe Vindicta's a B2. I haven't played her since the nerfs that just went through to her bird. And I'm trying to remember if there were more nerfs as well. I think we'll keep her in a B, but it's a little tricky to put her in that B. I'm not totally sure where I stand with her in the moment. But basically, Spirit build Vindicta is very strong. Gun build Vindicta is still pretty strong. The simple reason this character is capable of so much is you can fly, do a lot of damage from range, and then just have those. They are under the 50% threshold. I am sniping you from potentially close, potentially mid-range, potentially across the entire fucking map for the same amount of damage snipes, and I can get a ton of those with rapid recharge, and they're just going to absolutely chunk. So Vindicta Snipe is a super strong ability, and if she's last hitting with those, and she's greedy enough to max it, then she's getting insane farm, which scales her really hard on a hyper carry pick, which means she just starts absolutely snowballing the shit out of the game and is ridiculous. So compared to characters like Haze, Infernus, 7, she is way more of an early game hyper carry type pick that is still going to be good in the late game. She's a lot more counterable in the late game than these characters, but she's somebody that can scale into it really hard, still have that huge DPS impact, provide more range than any of them. I keep excluding Grey Talon from this because Grey Talon feels so much more ability based, so it's a little weird to compare him. Realistically, he should be in that conversation too. But yeah, she's maybe up here. I'm not totally sure at the moment. I'm going to notch her down just because of the recent nerfs that she got, just kind of as a guesstimate. I haven't particularly been seeing her or getting like wrecked by her in any of my recent games or anything like that. So probably feeling a little more middle of the pack at the moment, but she is just capable of doing so much with her flight, her 3, if you're scaling it up. Otherwise the 3 is not going to be super impactful, but if you scale it up, the 3 does a stupid amount. It's such a long-term dot. It can inherently just landing Vindicta 3 in the mid to late game if you're building into it will eventually tick people down to like half health, maybe even a third of their health, and then you snipe them and they're dead. If they're half health, it's 2 snipes and they're dead. So like just landing the 3, waiting patiently, and then assuming they're still around invisible, ulting them is all it takes. That is absurd. And it can work from any range. The dot will hit the same from any range. The ult will hit the same from any range. That's absolutely crazy. The big downside of the character, of course, is like knockdown exists. Any sorts of CCs taken her out of the air, she gets so punished in most circumstances if she's flying and then she's taken out of that flight. So a lot of the time, if you want to play her consistently, you're going spirit build, building for bird and ult, and then playing kind of more on like rooftops and stuff, less reliant on the flight, or at least tucked into your team enough that if you fall down, your team will be around you. So that makes her less consistent for gun damage. And if you go that gun build where you're trying to play more heavily around the 2 and the 1, like the tether and the flight, then it's a lot more likely that like some sort of CC will knock you out of the air. You'll be out of position, or at least out of position enough that people can get to you. You're just dead as hell. So hard to defend yourself at that point. So that makes her a lot more risky. So I don't know, kind of just like standard average of the pack, probably. Definitely capable of having crazy impact as such a hyper carry, but probably just here at the moment because there's enough counterplay for her. Warden is a tricky one. Probably here. Warden ult is capable of doing a lot of stuff in team fights. It is also capable of doing a lot of nothing in team fights if they just run away. It is also capable of winning the game. I think overall his kit is just solid. He's just a solid character. Warden 2 gives him a decent amount of ability, a little bit of tankiness. The tankiness doesn't matter all that much. Warden 1 is going to slow people down a bit for you, do some decent damage. You can build Improved Burst on it, build Quicksilver Reload on it. It's going to make it harder for them to trade you because they're getting debuffed. And if you're actually getting the Cage on people, very strong ability. Cage is capable of doing a lot. Of course, it's also an ability you can tend to get out of. Slowing Hex is just kind of an inherent core item on Warden to try and land more of those cages. Same with Mystic Reach. The ultimate, one of the stronger team fight ults in the game. But if you just if you're in a spot where you know Warden ult is coming and you can just run away, it takes a lot of itemization for Warden to be able to run you down. So it's an ult that has a lot of counterplay, assuming you're able to move in advance. If you're not able to move in advance, there is very little counterplay, and Warden is just going to do his thing, and you are just going to hope that you can somehow get away at some point, because he's going to do crazy damage. He's going to sustain all of that damage that he's dealing, and it's just an absolute monster ult. And it does start with a long cooldown, but once you get it maxed, it no longer has a long cooldown. So capable of doing a lot in team fights, capable of doing a lot to catch people 1v1, but they can get out of those 1v1 situations through itemization, moving well, stuff like that, getting out of his slowing hex in his cage. And in the ultimate, there is potential counterplay to just kind of not get very Warden ulted as a team. It just depends. So he's somebody that's capable of doing crazy stuff, also capable of not impacting that hard. It just varies. Obviously, as the Warden, you can do more to set up for yourself, but he ends up being a little too situational to be higher. If you could consistently just do everything you ever wanted to do with Warden, he'd be here. But you can't. Wraith is somebody, I was looking at this list and I was like, who the hell is an S? Wraith is an S. Wraith is absolutely crazy. This is something in competitive, she might not be an S. I think for pubs, for just normal deadlock play, I think she is an S tier character. And up until my recent Spirit build, I only would have put her here, which is still very good. I only would have put her in A. I think she's an S. The DPS you can deal with Wraith through a Spirit build like the one that I just uploaded, and this isn't meant to be like advertising the build or anything. This is just how it is. Literally nobody in the game can compete. Nobody at all. And the big thing that makes it especially strong is, unlike somebody like Haze, where you can get crazy Haze DPS, Wraith does both. Wraith does gun damage and spirit damage. She does do so much spirit damage that it's definitely more important to be getting spirit armor, spirit barrier, like definitely more spirit sided damage, but you can build more into the gun damage to also make it more balanced, to be fair. But yeah, like in that build, we were capable of, I don't remember how many cards it hypothetically would have been to do it, but just so often it's like you can be getting like 1,000 bullet damage. And I think over the course of the 3 damage on top, the ult damage on top, and probably 4 cards, you should be able to do at least 3k spirit damage and be dealing like 4k total in the span of like a second and a half, something like that. Like you can do absolutely absurd DPS. And the downside to Wraith is her ultimate has quite a bit of counterplay. You can itemize against it. You can just run away from it. You know, and at least in most circumstances, maybe she catches you in a spot where it's just going to instantly CC you. Her cards, they do need to be charged up, which especially in the early game is not inherently that easy to have charged up. So if you're catching her without cards, she is significantly weaker, assuming that you're actually playing around those cards. The teleport can be blocked with slowing hex, with silencing glyph. Her 3 is kind of just going to exist and be strong, to be fair. But the 3 might be on cooldown, depending if she's not building enough spirit or if it just happened to go on to cooldown, because the duration does last a while once you scale it up. That's a big nerf to her DPS. But when she has buttons up, Wraith is just like a monster that is just like on a completely different level than anybody else 1v1. And her ultimate does not need to exist for her to be this monster. As long as she can left click you with her 3 up and throw cards, you are getting obliterated. You need to like pop Ethereal Shift or do some sort of shit to just temporarily live. And then she can keep doing it, assuming your team's not coming into clutch for you. She can just do it again. So I think she's up here. I think she's ridiculous. And on a similar note, Yamato, I think, is going to go all the way into S, even though she's been getting nerfs. The recent ult change, like I brought up in the recent Yamato video, is crazy. She has gotten, I think, 2 pretty big nerfs to that ult since then. I still don't think it's brought her down to here. I still think she's up here. When I play Yamato, she feels like such a monster at the moment. And the reason for that is that her 1 hits very hard. Her 2 gives her some crazy mobility. Her 3 provides a lot of sustain and a lot of tankiness because it's hard to trade into. Because once you get that single point in it, it provides such a long, very powerful fire rate slow. And then with the new ultimate, you get so tanky. You get your cooldown's refreshed as you used to. You have it for a long duration. You can extend that duration if you're getting kills, which you're tending to. She just feels like so much more of a tanky powerhouse now compared to a temporarily immortal assassin type pick. And that tanky powerhouse fits so well for her kit that it feels like she just desperately needs more nerfs to tone her down. Because at the moment, she is simultaneously an assassin capable of one-shotting you, but also the tankiest character in the game. And even with the nerfs, it still feels like she's the tankiest character in the game. I don't think you could argue it. I maybe Kelvin Dome, but Kelvin has nowhere near the DPS, so who cares? Like, Yamato ult is just, if there's any ability in the game getting popped where it's like, fuck, how are we killing this? Honestly, even over Kelvin Dome, assuming you're not on the outside of the Kelvin Dome, Yamato ult still tends to reign supreme. Maybe like very beginning of the game, Kelvin Dome is just, you get so much healing, you're not killing him, but he's also probably not killing you in so many scenarios. Yeah, she is just an absolute unit at the moment, but I expect nerfs to be coming and then she'll come down here. Like these two, I think are going to be keeping their spots for a while. Yamato pretty soon should be down here. Is my guesstimate. Viscous, recently, I would have just put him in C. I love Viscous. I think Viscous has a super fun kit, but I don't think Viscous was very good. With the recent reach changes, and with the somewhat recent spirit scaling change to Viscous 1, I think Viscous is up here. I don't think Viscous is strong enough to be an A. I think Viscous is capable of providing a lot of impact. I think the big issue is generally gun build Viscous is not going to be like any sort of nightmare pick in any world. The only way gun build Viscous is like, oh my god, Viscous is insane. It's just that the player's insane. Spirit scaling Viscous is capable of doing quite a bit, but the issue is just how often are you like dumpstering the entire team versus just getting a good Viscous ult and good overall damage. Like the thing that keeps Viscous from going higher is just, you're not going to tend to make absolutely crackhead, I have won the game type plays with Viscous, even though Viscous is like a fairly team fight oriented, fairly AoE oriented character. But right now Viscous feels a lot more consistent than he has in the past, where his damage on the 1 has just gotten raised as you get into late game, assuming you're going into any sort of spirit build, because you're getting a 1.9 spirit scaling on the splatter. That's crazy. And the ultimate now gets big with reach, and that matters a lot for landing that ultimate, because while it makes it easier to hit enemies, you are not gate kept out of going into certain tunnels, which might change soon. I don't know. Like your hitbox to pad through things is the same. Your hitbox to land on enemies gets way bigger. So that reskin Viscous ball build we ran, normally, you know, I went to the absolute extremes of making the ball big. You should try and make it that big, but simply building Mystic Reach, probably eventually improved reach, is plenty to make Viscous way stronger as a character now. And making that ball bigger makes the Warp Stone tech, the Phantom Strike tech, the Magic Carpet tech even stronger than it was before. Which is really, really solid. And then Cube is an incredibly strong support ability. You can do some ridiculous stuff, especially if you go Rescue Beam. Rescue Beam Cube is the ultimate just nice try bozo. My teammate is not dying here combo in the entire game. So that's really good. Splatter does plenty of damage. The punch is very inconsistent. Punch is capable of catching people really out of position. It's also capable of being a pretty bad ability overall. Ball tends to be a pretty decent ult. Sometimes it's going to be crazy, sometimes it's not. So those two later abilities tend to be a little more inconsistent for Viscous, but generally just a solid character at the moment. Shiv. This might be controversial. This might be controversial. I think we're putting Shiv here. I think Shiv is just a C at the moment. I think not that long ago, Shiv was up here. Right now, it feels a lot harder to build Rage. I think, in general, Shiv just needs to be ahead. If Shiv is not ahead, he sucks. And it's a lot harder to get ahead when it's a lot harder to build up that Rage in the early game and be that kind of dominant monster. So you really need to be like in and out and around fights a lot more as Shiv now. And it just makes it so much harder to do that snowbally Shiv thing that you used to be able to do. And then even if you do, I don't feel like it's crazy as it used to be. So capable of providing a lot of damage while being very, very tanky. But the issue is if you don't scale hard enough to get that base damage doing enough relative to their health, or just being tanky enough relative to the damage you're eating back, then you're not getting those snowball, I am still somehow alive in these fight situations where you're starting to like 1v2, 1v3, they just keep trying to send more people to deal with you. And that just kind of ruins the whole point of the character. Because Dagger on its own is not a menacing ability. The 2 is the main menacing thing for Shiv, along with the ultimate. And so if you are not getting that double dash into ult combo over and over again in 1v1s and team fights, whatever, then you're not really feeling too scared of Shiv. And Shiv needs that rage, and he needs those consistent opportunities, and it's just so much harder to get him now after the rage changes. So I think probably just down here, you could maybe argue up here. I don't think you can argue Shiv's in here anymore, even though he was so recently. And then Mirage. I think Mirage is a solid A. I think with the way most people play him in my games, he's probably just a B. But I think kit-wise, Mirage, I think should absolutely be an A. I think in my hands, I would consider Mirage an A. Like a lot of these characters overall are going to be, if I'm playing them, I feel like they're here. But then I'm also trying to take into account how other people play them in my games. And I think it really lines up overall throughout from my perspective. So Mirage Tornado, crazy ability, such a strong ability. You do need to be in a certain range to be landing it, but that knockup is so strong to begin with. You can just put 2 points into it to make it even longer. You are also getting immunity out of it. You are also getting a dash out of it. You can lower the cooldown with it. Wait, actually, is the lift the first rank? Is it first rank lift and then second rank cooldown? That might be what it is. I don't remember now. It's one or the other. Either way, it doesn't matter that much. Those 2 points both do a ton for the ability. So that's very strong. The 2 in the early game for Mirage is ridiculous. It is a monster ability for the laning stage because in a 1v1 lane, you can still be stealing around 200 health total. Only that like 90 health from an enemy hero because it's a 1v1. But you can hit a 2 on them and then hit 2s on the minions, and the minions will give you a lot more health. And that if health technically you're stealing it is kind of the equivalent of getting healed, where the heal can go past your original health bar. And so that is like, how do you kill Mirage? How do you kill Mirage when you can put just 1 point into this ability and it's got a pretty standard like 15-ish second cooldown? Now, every 15 seconds, at least when there's a wave around, Mirage is healing 200 and taking 90 from you. And then if there's no wave around, is still healing 90, taking 90. That is such a massive health trade-off on a really reliable ability. Because even if you're whiffing them a little bit, you got 4 beetles and they're not very hard to land. They got a decent hitbox. They go pretty fast. You can clip around walls just a little bit. So yeah, Mirage 2 is a monster ability. Mirage Mark overall is a garbage ability, but it's very good in the early game. It is so good early on for just extra poke damage, and Mirage already gets so much control over the early game with it too, that he is a laning phase menace in 1v1 lanes and 2v2 lanes with the Mark +2 combo, where just by landing gun damage consistently, you are just getting bonus damage on top compared to other characters in the game. So late game, it does fall off super hard, but late game, you are still probably scaling into quite a bit of gun damage, so you just inherently do good damage. And then Tornado continues to get stronger as you get deeper and deeper into the game and get more and more pick potential in sort of team fight scenarios with that ability. So Mark early game, very good, does fall off really hard late. And then the ultimate is so strong in the middle stages of the game for rotating on people, catching them where it's like, okay, we're in a 1v1 here. This person's far enough up that they're not out of position, but if I ult on them, they're effectively out of position, and just looking for pick opportunities so strong, as well as the ability to go split push a lane and then force somebody to go defend the lane so they're not losing Walker. And then the moment they go to defend it, you can just ult into a team fight or ult into a lane or something and probably get some sort of PvP impact there. So not only are you not getting ganked for going for that Walker and forcing somebody out of position, but then you're probably catching somebody else and making a play there. So Mirage ult's capable of doing a lot. And really the big standout thing for the character is as you get into the deeper stages of the game, even though you do fall off, the ult can still be pretty useful. The Tornado is just maybe the best core ability in the game. It's so good overall. It does so many different things. And you still have plenty of gun damage. The Beetle's still solid. The Mark falls off hard, but that's okay. To still impact the game and be decent. And that does it. That is every single character. We've got 3 in S, 7 in A. I think this is 8. This is 8. 8 in B. I don't know why I struggled with that. 3 in C, 1 in D, which I think is a decently balanced list. We've got a little bit of a pyramid going here. Fewer characters down here. One thing, I don't remember if I said this in the beginning. It was probably important to say it. I don't think the skill, not the skill gap. I don't think the gap in value in these heroes is at least anywhere near the gap in value of Smite heroes. I don't think, I don't know for sure if this would be true for like Dota or League. Even though these are where I'm ranking these heroes and I think it's pretty accurate, it is not like you are a legitimate troll for picking Bebop. It's not like that. And it's not like, oh my God, how the fuck could you not be playing Dynamo, Wraith, Yamato every single game? There is plenty of value in all of these picks. They are all capable of being pretty solid. I definitely think overall Bebop is pretty bad. I think Haze, McGinnis, and Shiv are not that much better. I think these three are ridiculously strong, and all the A tiers are very, very solid. But you can play all these characters and do fine. It is not like you are just absolutely hard nerfing yourself for picking Bebop. It is not like, what the fuck are you doing for not picking an S tier character? Maybe a little bit in pubs, maybe Yamato. Like if you are new to the game, I don't know. Yamato's actually kind of weird to learn when you're new to the game though. Yamato right now, like in terms of just running it down, she is a little bit in a silly spot for just consistency compared to these two, compared to Dynamo and Wraith. But that'll change so soon it doesn't matter as much. Right now, just pressing the ult button on Yamato is so magical. It's just so silly. But yeah, anyways, I do think there's less of a power gap between these ranks than at least Smite would have, and I'm guessing other MOBAs would have. So even though I've still done the S, A, B, C, D, and I definitely, I'm pretty confident in where I've put each of these heroes, I don't think it's, just massive detriments between each rank or anything like that. Some of these are pretty subtle. And that's exactly what I was talking about. There have not been crazy balance changes for the most part in Deadlock. Not that many heroes have had crazy changes. One of the craziest was, it probably didn't even look as crazy as it ended up being, was for Shiv. And Shiv went from S to this, in my opinion. And that's just making Rage not stack as hard, where it's easy to build it and then easy to keep it. Just simply making it a decent amount more work to get Shiv's Rage going, dropped him all the way from up here to down here. And that's just because, you go from having bonus damage and a double dash to not having bonus damage and having a single dash. That's pretty much all there is to it. That is such a massive change to the character. So there are lots of subtle changes that come through in Deadlock where you can see, when I started playing Bebop felt a lot more up here. Maybe that's partially because I was new, but Bebop was a decently different character state. And then we did a decent amount to the character, and he's all the way down here. So many of these subtle changes will make 2 rank differences, and then the big changes will make 3 to 4 rank differences. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that kind of covers things. But thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you all enjoyed the video. Let me know if you did enjoy the video, and let me know if you want to see other videos. I have zero plans to do another tier list. Somewhere down the road, I'd probably do a similar tier list to this one. I am not planning on doing sex tier list for Deadlock. I am not planning on doing, I don't know, any sorts of other tier list for Deadlock at the moment. But if you have other types of content outside of just standard Deadlock gameplay you'd like to see, feel free to leave it in the comments. I already have plans for quick guides that I want to be uploading soon, where it's basically going to be concise, simple introductions to heroes, where it's not just going to be the I'm reading abilities off or anything like that. It'll be this is how the hero works. This is the things that make them stand out. These are the general playstyles you should be looking for, and specific mechanics, stuff like that. Those will all already be on the way soon. But yeah, any other sorts of Deadlock content that might stand out, whether it's guides, whether it's just kind of stuff that's just different from standard gameplay, feel free to leave it in the comments if there's anything that you'd like to see. But thank you all for watching. Hopefully you all enjoyed the video, and I will see you all in the next one.
I've been seeking for the glory. Say my name. And I've been trying to write my own story in the search for fame. I'm sitting here in this empty room. Walls keep tumbling down.